Hi everyone, Louis from Spitfire Audio here. I'll be taking you through a demo I've written which uses all 4 libraries in our new and improved Ólafur Arnalds Collection, now including Stratis. Starting at Spitfire, I couldn't help but be drawn to our collaborations with Ólafur, so let's see what's in this fantastic collection. First up we have Ólafur Arnalds Evos, which is a collection of recordings from a small string section performing evolving patterns which you can play together to create stunning textures. It makes use of our Evo grid feature in the UI, and in this piece I've actually taken specific patches and played them together to create a really unique texture. Ólafur Arnalds Chamber Evos takes this idea to a larger scale. While still maintaining fragility and warmth in its sounds, the library also comes with the addition of waves patches, having notes move in a wave-like dynamic arc, creating beautiful swells in the strings that can be played in a number of styles and lengths. Next we have Ólafur Arnalds Composer Toolkit, containing an impressive variety of sounds from an amazing felted grand piano to synth sounds and rhythms to warped and sonically manipulated patches. And finally, we have our newest release, Ólafur Arnalds Stratis, containing rich polyrhythmic piano patterns that give your music movement, as well as including synth patterns and warped patches. This isn't an instrument you want to miss out on, and it's also fun just to play even if you're not necessarily writing anything with it. You'll also hear I included Lab's Opia, which is a collection of really unique and interesting textures and sounds created out of audio from Ólafur and all the artists and friends that performed at his London festival, Opia. For those that don't know, Labs is our free range of instruments with a new one released every month, so if you haven't downloaded them yet, you've got no reason not to. Now let's take a listen to my piece. So for the main crux of this piece I'm using Stratis, and I've heavily centered the piece around this rhythmic wave patch, which is just remarkable. So let's solo that out. So much like the waves patches in our Chamber Evolutions libraries, the dynamic shape of the notes is more like a sort of arc shape, like a wave. And if I go ahead and open up the UI, I've set the polyphony on our little sidebar here to 8, so the maximum amount of different rhythms and notes that can be played. And this is actually the default preset for the rhythmic waves patch, and I think it's one of Ólafur's own curated presets for this patch. So if I flick back to the quick effects page, I've turned the delay up a little bit and the reverb up. And a cool feature about Stratis is there's actually a dedicated effects page. As you can see here, you've got filters, reverb, a tape saturation, delay, and a chorus. And then by clicking on them, you can customize the individual parameters for that effect, as well as also assigning them by clicking on the buttons on the side here. So I could maybe assign chorus to A, and even if I wanted to assign the individual specific parameters of that effect, I can click on that and also assign that as well. So looking back at the matrix, each column represents a different pattern that's being played. So the first note's going to play this pattern allocated to this column, second note this pattern, third note this one, and so on. And composing this piece, I actually started with this track. After getting my hands on Stratis and playing around for a bit, I just hit record and improvised around some chords in the key of D major. So I began the piece on an F sharp minor, and then I'm slowly hinting at other chords, playing sort of fifths. And as we go ahead, we get more colourful with some major sevenths in there and some other sort of sustained notes and suspended notes. And what's great is there's not really that much automation needed to get this patch sounding nice. I did put a little bit around bar 10 here. I'll just zoom in a little bit there. Just had a little break here, so I just automated the dynamics and expression there just so we get a bit of a breather before we begin our chord sequence again. That takes us through all the way to the end of the piece, ending on our D major there. I'm just going to go ahead and play some chords with this patch, opening the UI just so you can see Stratis at work. What was also important with this patch is I actually turned the release up a little bit more than what it's set to, just so those chords kind of blend in quite nicely into each other to create a really nice texture and bass for the piece. As we progress further into our piece, it's around bar 19 where all of the patches and instruments start playing together. You get a lovely large texture there, and something to aid the rhythmic waves was another Stratis patch called Swarms using the piano. I'll just solo that out and bring the UI up for that. And on the side panel here, you've got a little bit of a different setup. You've got the option to decide whether the sounds played are a loop or a one shot. And like I said before, each sort of column follows a rough rule about the pattern it's playing. And within the Swarms patch, you can actually customize that even more, a different recording of that pattern by clicking on the click-throughs here. So in each square, you can see all the icons are different. You can just click on one and it will change the type of recording is allocated to that pattern. And if you want to know what the icons mean, you can just look in Stratis and the advanced, click on Matrix Swarms, and you get a little description of what each of these icons represent in terms of what patterns are being played. So I've got them all actually set onto the busy dynamic long pattern, and to change the pattern that's being played in the matrix, like with all of our patches that use the matrix in Stratis, you just click on a different square there. Or if, like me, you wanted to set it to a specific type of pattern or swarm, you just click the icon at the top. So I use these swarms in combination with the rhythmic waves to help add a little bit more texture and sort of randomness to this pattern. So I'll just go ahead and play the swarms out for you and then maybe add in the rhythmic waves to see the kind of effect it had. So you can hear it's just another different pattern to help add a bit of flair to our established sort of chords in the rhythmic waves. And Stratis isn't just limited to the piano. We've got some synth variations of the matrices that Stratis uses, and I've used two here, the synth matrix, the looped rhythms patch, and they're both playing the same thing. One's an octave higher, pan to the right, I've used a bit of binaural panning there, and the lower one just a little bit louder, because we've already got some nice high tones with this piano. Let's show you what they're doing. So the higher one, if I click on the UI to open that up, it's playing a pattern that sounds like this. And then for our lower one, it's actually playing the same pattern but offbeat. So when you play them together, you get a really nice pattern, especially with the panning there. Kind of create a lot of space with that. So it sounds like this. To see how the note didn't play straight away as soon as I hit the keys. I also turned up the filter a little bit on this one as well to make it a bit warmer. And just going back to that effects page, if you click on the filter, you can change whether it's a high pass or low pass filter by clicking the switch there. So if I solo these both out and have them play together, you'll see what I mean with that lower one being a bit offset from the top one there. Some amazing sounds, and I've used these quite simply. I've got them all playing the same pattern, but just for a bit of fun, maybe let's randomize it and I could play something, see how it sounds. Actually, maybe clicking all of these, get every pattern at once. Oh, and speaking of randomizing, by the way, there is a randomize feature where you can just click that and it will randomize all the squares on the matrix. And you can actually randomize it over time as well. So if you synced it to the BPM, you can choose how many beats until the matrix changes and the patterns change, or if you're not synced, you can just change the amount of seconds until it changes. But yeah, let's play a little chord showing off all the rhythms. You can see on the side there, it's showing which note is allocated to which pattern as well on the right hand side of that matrix. Moving on, we've also got some synth matrix swarms, which are just stunning. So the attack and the release is quite high on these. You get some just gorgeous paddy sounds, and it kind of sounds a little bit like something you'd maybe hear out of Blade Runner or something a bit sci-fi. Let's just give them a play. Great to really add a nice ethereal quality to your music. There's also some warped content in Stratis, which is using our standard GUI, which you may be familiar with. And if we go in here in Contacts, go down to the Warps folder, there's about over 30 different kinds of warped sounds. So taking these recordings and heavily affecting them and doing all sorts of crazy things with them. So you can get certain sounds from pads to really crazy like modular stuff that's just insane. So I've used this patch called Fading Light, and it's kind of coupling up with the synth matrix swarms that I've used, playing a really nice high line, and I've got that panned a little bit more to the left. So let's hear how this patch sounds. Combining that with the swarms. So nice. Let's add our looped rhythms in there as well. Actually, why not add the whole of Stratis? such an incredible library to play. It's like I mentioned in the introduction, it's great to play even if you're not just recording with it. Moving on, I've used the Ólafur Arnalds Composer Toolkit, and I've used it quite sparingly here. I've only got one patch here using one of the tempo-locked synth rhythms. So if I go into here, into the files, here we go. So within the Composer Toolkit of Ólafur Arnalds, go to the Composer Toolkit section and the tempo-locked, and we've got a couple of really cool patches here. And I've used Rhythm 1. Adds a little bit more of a grittier element to the piece of music, and it's acting as a little bit of a bass line here. So let's give that a little listen as well. You can also see it uses similar UI to the warps in our Stratis library. See, I've got that playing in octaves there. So this patch from the Composer Toolkit library was a great one to use to add just another rhythmical element to the music. We've also got another patch using the Ólafur Arnalds Evos library. You'll find that in there as well. You have curated patches that actually make full use of an Evo grid. So you've got your note centers on the left there, and then the kind of evolution that's being played on the top there, and you can peg in what sort of sounds you want to hear from what notes that are being played. But what's great about this, if you don't want to use the Evo grid as well, is you can also come out and click on individual evolutions and then load in specific patches and recordings. And as you can see here, I've got a combination of 4 different kinds of sounds, and I've just had that held down, creating a really nice drone over an F sharp and a C sharp there. If I click on the automation, you can see I've kind of trying to follow the swarms that we've got in our chamber evolutions and the waves. Let's give that a play. So I've got that as a sort of underlying section to the main part of our piece. You see a lot of these sounds can be quite subtle, but when actually combining them together, you can create something really beautiful and sort of fragile, creating your own sort of textural world with them. And you can see I've got the binaural panning on this patch as well, and I've put that right at the back there. Now this is a fun one. I've got 4 patches using the Ólafur Arnalds Chamber Evolutions library. And similarly to the Ólafur Arnalds Evolutions library, these also make use of a evolution grid. So you see there's 4 patches there, the main section of the library. You've got 2 grids divided up by the basses and the chamber strings, but then you also get the basses waves and the chamber waves. And I've made full use of these chamber waves with these 4 tracks here. Opening the UI back up again, you can see there's 12 different articulations. There's sort of 3 parts. You get your normal long notes at varying lengths for these waves. You've got a tremolo version, and then you've got a vibrato version of that as well. And you also get a little mic mix here as well, which you can customize. So you can see I've got the close, a little bit of tree, and a lot of ambient for these patches here. And using these patches was the second element I played in when composing this piece. So after I got those rhythmic waves in Stratis there, and on all of them I used the longest version of the waves, and it was a case of just playing it in and picking out certain notes and suspending and sustaining certain notes in relation to the chords that I'm playing in the rhythmic waves there. Similarly with the rhythmic waves, you see there's not a lot of automation needed, and you'll hear that when I play it in just a moment. I just got a little bit of dynamic automation there at that break at about bar 10, and for some of the waves I wanted them to enter a little bit earlier, so I played them a bit before the start of each bar, and this stuff is really beautiful, so let's give it a play. See, there's not really any automation needed. As you can hear that dynamic arc in the waves. This track takes over the main harmony. The other long track and the tremolo's taking over the bass. The vibrato track at the top there, taking the higher notes. Just stunning, these incredible sounds in chamber evolutions. And last but not least, I mentioned that I was using a Labs, and this is Labs Opia, which is quite fitting. The Ólafur collection, as it's sort of Ólafar's Labs. It's sounds and recordings taken from his London festival, Opia. So let's open up the UI, and I've used the percussion kit for all 4 of these tracks, but it has a whole host of different kinds of patches and sounds. You've got a real good variety with Opia. You can get some really paddy stuff, or interesting textural stuff, or synth stuff. And I actually put all 4 of these tracks into a summing track, so I could then automate a single band EQ on this summing track here, and it goes across the board for all of these tracks and affects them. So the way I did this is I highlighted all 4 tracks, went into track, create track stack, and then it gave me the option to create a summing track, and then it created this little bad boy. And yeah, like I said, I've put a single band EQ on this, and I've also put a little channel EQ, and on most of the tracks individually as well, I've also sort of heavily affected them with an EQ. For most of them, taken out some of that high end and just certain frequencies until I was happy with it. So it's a bit more of a muffled, warmer and lower sound. So let's take you through what each track's doing. So we've got this first track here acting as a click. Let's put that automation on as well. See, there's a bit of a volume increase. And then later I've also automated the panning. This track here acts as a sort of snare, but it's not as harsh. You can see that's panned to the right. The one above that acts as a kick. It's a lot more central. And the track above that is also a kind of kick sound, adding a little offbeat. You can hear the volumes turned up quite heavily for that one as well. If I just go ahead and play everything else. You can hear how that rhythm nicely slots in with the rest of our Ólafur libraries. I particularly like when Opia comes in this little drop before the rest of our sounds come in. So let me just play that for you again. It's this offbeat that I like. Cool stuff. And also taking a look at the automation for Ólafur Arnalds Evos. You can see I've drawn in the volume there just to really help accentuate those waves, to support some of the chamber evolution sounds and the rhythmic waves in Stratis. Now let's move on to the mix. You can see on most of the tracks I've got 2 buses here. One of them is the UAD lexicon. I've got this set on large hall. Turn the depth up on that a little bit. And I've also got a FabFilter Pro reverb on the second bus as well. And as well as using a channel EQ to take out some low frequencies and add some higher ones, I've also used an isotope imager and then a UAD precision limiter just on the end there. And that's about it. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you've learned a little bit about our Ólafur collection and what it has to offer. Keep making music, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.